My husband leaned over and buckled his assistant's seatbelt right in the front seat of my car, then turned to me with a raised voice saying, "She gets carsick easily. Stop being so sensitive." So, I sold his house and his car. I received 222 missed calls from him, and I only ever said one sentence in response. Before the story begins, let me know in the comments where you're reading this from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more captivating stories. Rain lashed against the Manhattan skyline that late afternoon, as if the heavens above New York City were reflecting the turmoil I hadn't yet dared to admit to myself. My windshield wipers moved in a rhythmic, monotonous beat, sweeping away the heavy drops and matching the anxious thumping of my heart. I am Catherine, a wife who should have been enjoying a warm cup of Earl Grey in our cozy Upper East Side townhouse, but instead, I was stuck in gridlock traffic on Park Avenue just to pick up my husband. Dan, our driver, had called in sick, and David had phoned me half an hour ago, sounding urgent. He claimed he left an important document in my SUV after our lunch date yesterday, and needed a ride home because Ubers were impossible to get in this torrential downpour. As a wife who always supported her husband's career, I didn't think twice. I made a U-turn, braved the midtown traffic, and now idled by the glass canopy of the skyscraper where David's real estate development firm was headquartered. My eyes scanned the fogged glass doors of the lobby. Soon enough, the man I was looking for emerged. David, wearing a tailored Tom Ford suit that perfectly hugged his broad shoulders, stepped out, but he wasn't alone. A young woman walked beside him. She was petite, her face bare of any heavy makeup, wearing an oversized blazer that gave her a fragile, damsel in distress aura that men always seemed to fall for. It was Cecilia, the intern who had become David's personal assistant 3 months ago. I had met her once at the company's holiday party. She was the type of girl who spoke in a soft whisper, constantly looked down, and apologized for things she didn't even do. I honked lightly to signal them. David looked up and immediately popped open his large black umbrella. What happened next made my hands grip the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Instead of rushing to the car alone, David wrapped his arm around Cecilia's shoulders, angling the umbrella carefully so she wouldn't get a single drop of rain on her, while his own left shoulder got completely soaked. They approached the car. I unlocked the doors, my logic dictating that Cecilia would slide into the back while David would take the passenger seat next to me. The front seat. The place that was rightfully mine as his wife. That seat was my territory. It was where we discussed our future, our home renovations, or simply held hands at red lights. But my logic was dead wrong. David opened the front passenger door. He didn't get in. Instead, he held it open and motioned for Cecilia to slide in. The girl hesitated for a second. Her eyes met mine through the rain-streaked glass. There was a strange glint in them, a look I couldn't quite decipher. A mix of feigned guilt and hidden triumph. "Oh, Mr. Sterling, I should just sit in the back." Cecilia's voice was muffled by the rain, but I could read her lips. "Just get in." "You look incredibly pale," David insisted, practically ushering her into the front seat. My seat. My blood ran hot. I sat frozen, unable to process the scene unfolding before me. David closed her door, tossed his wet umbrella haphazardly into the back, and jogged around the hood to jump into the driver's seat, effectively pushing me out of my spot. "Babe, hop in the back," David said hurriedly before his pants even touched the leather. He was out of breath. The smell of his expensive cologne mixed with the scent of the rain. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat as I tried to keep my composure despite the sudden tightness in my chest. "Why do I have to sit in the back? That's my seat, David." David clicked his tongue, looking at me as if I had just asked the most idiotic question in the world. He glanced at Cecilia, who was now massaging her temples in a highly dramatized display of agony. Cecilia is feeling really sick. She almost fainted in the elevator. She gets terrible motion sickness in the back seat. Plus, traffic is a nightmare right now. It'd be awful if she threw up in our car, David explained. To him, it sounded perfectly logical. To me, it sounded like pure garbage. She can take a Dramamine, David, or roll down the window. I am your wife. Why am I the one being shoved in the back like your Uber driver? I protested, my voice rising. My dignity was stung. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about how he prioritized this girl's comfort over my feelings, right in front of my face. David glared at me, his previously concerned expression turning fierce. "What is wrong with you? You're blowing a simple seat arrangement out of proportion. Stop being so dramatic, Kat. Are you seriously jealous of an intern? She is sick. Where is your basic empathy as a woman?" That reprimand felt like a slap. Dramatic. Jealous. The word slipped so easily from the mouth of the man who had vowed to cherish me above all else. I looked at Cecilia. She lowered her head further, her shoulders trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Sterling. I'll just get out. I can take the subway," Cecilia squeaked in a manufactured shaky voice. Crocodile tears pooled in her eyes. "See? Now she's crying. Just stay put, Cecilia. Kat, hurry up and get in the back. We're blocking the driveway," David ordered impatiently. Cars behind us were already honking. The building's doorman was giving us uncomfortable looks. I took a deep breath, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat. I am an educated woman, a sophisticated professional who knows how to behave in public. Fighting in a corporate driveway would only humiliate me. With stiff, robotic movements, I opened my door, stepped out into the freezing rain that instantly ruined my silk blouse, opened the rear door, and got in. I was wet, freezing, and utterly degraded. David didn't care that I was soaked. He was too busy pulling the seatbelt across Cecilia. "Here, let me get that. You'll pinch your fingers. I know you're feeling weak," he murmured softly. His tone was a complete 180 from how he had just barked at me. Click. The sound of the seatbelt locking echoed loudly in my ringing ears. David ensured the strap rested perfectly across her petite frame, his hand lingering just a little too long on her shoulder. The SUV merged into the chaotic Manhattan traffic. In the back seat, I felt like a ghost. Invisible. Insignificant. I watched them through the rearview mirror. David's eyes constantly darted toward Cecilia. "Is the AC too cold, Cece? Should I turn it down?" he asked, dripping with affection. "Just a little, sir. Thank you. And I'm really sorry for inconveniencing you." "Ma'am," Cecilia replied. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting mine for a split second. It wasn't an apologetic look. It was a taunt. The corner of her lip curled up slightly, a micro-smirk meant only for me, hidden from David's view. "It's fine, Catherine. Is very understanding, right, babe?" David answered for me, not even bothering to look back. I didn't answer. I turned my head to stare at the wet, neon-lit streets of New York. The towering skyscrapers that had witnessed our struggles to build his company from the ground up now felt foreign. Years ago, I was the one sitting in the front, holding the map, giving him pep talks when he was exhausted from managing dusty construction sites. That front seat was the throne he built for me. The drive to her place felt agonizingly long. Cecilia would occasionally let out a soft groan, and every time she did, David would overreact, offering her water, mints, and even his shoulder if she needed to rest her head. "If you're dizzy, just lean the seat back, Cece. Treat this car like your own," David told her. I gripped my designer handbag so tightly my fingers ached. "Treat it like your own." This car, this luxurious Mercedes, was mostly paid for with my personal savings when his firm hit a severe cash flow crisis last year. And now, he was telling another woman to make herself at home in it. The storm outside raged on, but the hurricane brewing inside my chest was far more destructive. I sat silently, recording every detail. The way he looked at her, the way she manipulated the situation, and how easily my position had been relegated to the back seat. This wasn't just about a car. This was a literal shift in my position in David's life, executed right in front of me under the guise of empathy. By the time we pulled up to Cecilia's modest apartment building in Astoria, Queens, the rain had stopped. David got out to open her door, walking her all the way to the building's entrance to make sure she got in safely. Through the tinted windows, I watched them stand facing each other. Cecilia touched his arm, gave him a sweet smile, and waved. David returned to the car with a glowing face, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. But as soon as he got behind the wheel and saw me still sitting in silence in the back, his smile vanished. "Why are you being so quiet? Are you really still mad? Grow up, Kat. Feel a little pity for her. She moved here from the Midwest and is completely alone in the city." David grumbled as he put the car in drive. "Just drive, David. I'm tired," I replied flatly. He scoffed and slammed his foot on the gas. He didn't know that in the dark back seat, my tears had finally started to fall. But they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of pure rage. crystallizing into an absolute, unbreakable resolve. The New York rain had washed away the last of my naivety about my husband. 3 days after the incident in the car, the atmosphere in our Upper East Side home was suffocating. The cold marble walls seemed to amplify the deafening silence between us. We spoke only when necessary about utility bills or the HVAC maintenance schedule. David acted as if everything was perfectly normal. In fact, he seemed happier, constantly smiling at his phone and quickly changing his expression whenever I walked into the room. That morning at the breakfast island, David hurriedly set down his coffee mug. He was dressed in casual business attire, a sleek carry-on bag resting near the door. "Hey, I have to fly to Chicago unexpectedly," he said, chewing his toast without looking me in the eye. "There's a structural issue at the new high-rise project. Might take 3 days to sort out." "Chicago?" I asked calmly, pouring him some water. "Didn't they hand over that project last month?" "Your project manager said everything went flawlessly." David's hand paused for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Yeah, it was handed over, but the client found a defect. I need to inspect it myself. You know I'm a perfectionist. I can't just trust my team's reports." To an outsider, the excuse sounded solid. But I had known David for over a decade. Whenever there was a real project crisis, he would be a stressed, irritable mess, pacing the floors and brainstorming with me until 3 a.m. Today, his face was bright, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He looked like a kid going to Disneyland. "Okay, have a safe trip," I replied smoothly. David stood up and gave my forehead a quick peck, a dry, flavorless gesture that felt entirely obligatory. "Take care of the house. I'll text you when I get to the hotel." His corporate car service arrived, and he was gone. Around noon, I planned to go to Whole Foods. Normally I'd take my compact city car, but it was in the shop for detailing. I had to take the Mercedes SUV. David hadn't driven it because he supposedly took a flight. The moment I opened the car door, the smell hit me. It wasn't the signature scent of premium leather, nor was it the Joe Malone car freshener I usually bought. It was a cloying, aggressively sweet scent, a cheap mix of synthetic vanilla and overwhelming floral notes, a highly specific fragrance that reminded me of those body sprays teenagers buy at the mall. My heart began to race. I sat in the driver's seat, forcing myself to breathe evenly. A wife's intuition, combined with her sense of smell, is rarely wrong. This wasn't my perfume. I wore Chanel. This was a scent that had seeped into the upholstery, suggesting its wearer had spent hours in this confined space. My eyes darted to the passenger seat. The angle was wrong. I always kept the backrest upright, but now it was reclined almost all the way back into a sleeping position. Who was sleeping here? David said he only used this car to commute to his office. My hands trembled as I reached into the deep crevices between the leather cushions of the passenger seat. My fingers brushed against something hard and cold. I pulled it out. It was a small cylindrical glass bottle with pink liquid inside. The cap was missing. The label read Pink Fantasy, a cheap drugstore brand, the world spun. This bottle must have slipped out of someone's purse or pocket while the seat was reclined during a long drive. I abandoned my grocery trip. I turned off the engine, took the bottle inside to the master bedroom, and locked the door. I grabbed my phone. I had tried so hard to give him the benefit of the doubt, to silence the paranoid whispers in my head. But physical evidence couldn't be argued with. I opened Instagram. I knew Cecilia's main account. It was curated to look innocent pictures of lattes, motivational quotes, and her rescue cat, very safe. But my gut told me there was more. I checked David's following list. Nothing suspicious. I went through the tagged photos of David's company account, scanning every employee, until I found an account with no real name. The handle was just random letters and numbers. CC, Love One. The account was private, but I wasn't born yesterday. I had a burner account I used to quietly monitor competitors' marketing trends. I could request to follow her, but she might not accept right away. I needed another way. I tried searching the username on Google Images, hoping an old cached photo would pop up. Nothing. Then, I tried location tags. David said he was in Chicago. But where was Cecilia? If they were together, they'd leave a digital footprint. I started searching popular weekend getaways from New York. Why? because the perfume smelled incredibly fresh, and the reclined seat implied a long, leisurely road trip, not stop-and-go city traffic. I checked the geotags for luxury cabins Catskills, the Hamptons Escapes, Montauk Resorts. My eyes burned as I scrolled through hundreds of photos of strangers. An hour passed. I didn't stop. And then I found it. It wasn't posted by Cecilia, but reshared by a trendy boutique winery in the Hamptons on their Instagram story. It was uploaded 2 hours ago. The photo was simple. 2 hands intertwined on a rustic wooden table, a backdrop of lush vineyards behind them. The woman's hand was petite. Her nails painted a bright bubblegum pink, the exact color of the perfume liquid. But the man's hand, I would recognize it anywhere, rough yet strong, with a small mole near the thumb. And the most damning piece of evidence was the watch wrapped around his wrist. A Patek Philippe Nautilus with a blue dial, a watch worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, the very watch I had bought for David for our 10th wedding anniversary 6 months ago. He never took it off. I zoomed in. In the corner of the photo rested a set of car keys with a leather keychain bearing David's company logo. The account tagged in the corner was CC, Love One. Beneath the photo was a small, sickening caption. My boss takes the best care of me. Thanks for the getaway, baby. Chicago, I hissed. The tears finally spilled over. So this was his business trip, taking his car-sick assistant to a luxury resort in the Hamptons, driving the car I helped pay for, enjoying a romantic vacation funded by the money I helped him earn. I felt physically nauseous. The memory of David rushing to open the car door for her flashed in my mind. She's fragile, he had said. She's sick. Turns out, the only cure for her sickness was a weekend in the Hamptons sleeping with a married man. I threw my phone onto the Egyptian cotton duvet. Walking over to the full-length mirror, I stared at myself. Catherine, 35. Still beautiful, sharp, and elegant. But my eyes looked so tired. I remembered how I had delayed having children just to help David build his empire. I remembered pawning my late mother's vintage jewelry to fund his very first real estate flip. Idiot! I cursed my reflection. You absolute idiot, Cat. But slowly, the tears stopped. The profound grief morphed into a bone-chilling coldness. The heartbreak froze over, solidifying into pure, unadulterated resolve. I picked up my phone again. I wasn't going to call David. I wasn't going to scream at him or confront him right now. That was too easy. If I raged now, he would just make excuses, gaslight me, or blame me for violating his privacy. No, I wasn't going to play dirty. I took a screenshot of the Instagram story. Enjoy your vacation, David. Enjoy it while it lasts, I murmured. Because when you get home, you won't find the same stupid wife waiting for you. I opened my MacBook. Step 1. Audit the bank accounts. Step 2. Check all assets solely in my name. Step 3. Call my lawyer. In the silence of that bedroom, the old Catherine died. The new Catherine, one who took no prisoners, was just born. Sitting across from Mr. Harrison, our trusted family attorney whom I considered an uncle, I made sure I didn't look like a victim. His midtown office was heavily air-conditioned, or maybe my blood had just run cold. Are you absolutely certain about this, Catherine? Mr. Harrison asked, pushing his reading glasses up his nose. He was reviewing the thick stack of asset portfolios I had brought in. This is a massive move. If David notices you liquidating the mutual funds and moving the joint stocks, he's going to panic. I offered a thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. That's exactly the point, Uncle Harry. I want him completely oblivious until it's too late. David is arrogant. He never checks the microfinances because he trusts me to handle the money. He only cares about the big numbers at the end of the fiscal year. Mr. Harrison sighed deeply, then nodded. Legally, the joint stocks in the holding company do have a joint tenancy with right of survivorship clause. But since you hold full power of attorney over your personal financial management, this transfer is completely legal as long as your signature is on it. However, regarding the townhouse, the Upper East Side house is in my name, Harry. It was a wedding gift from my father, I cut in sharply. The deed is safely in my bank's safety deposit box, not at the house. I've already contacted my father's most ruthless luxury real estate broker. He agreed to list it as a pocket listing. No for sale signs out front. Only shopped around to an exclusive network of foreign buyers. Brilliant, Mr. Harrison praised. So the plan is to gut everything and leave him just the shell? Exactly, I replied, my voice like ice. When reality hits him, I want him to realize he has nothing left to stand on but the fragile little legs of his intern. Leaving the law firm, I headed straight to the bank. The liquidation process didn't take long. I was a top-tier private wealth client. Every single dime from the mutual funds, the high-yield savings, and the money I had personally invested before we even got married, it was all wired to an offshore account in a European bank David knew nothing about. Walking out into the New York air, I felt like a ton of bricks had been lifted off my shoulders. That evening, David returned from his Chicago trip. He looked refreshed, sporting a slight tan. Probably from the Hamptons sun, definitely not from a windy Chicago construction site. He even brought back a box of Garrett popcorn. It was almost comical he had actually gone out of his way to order Chicago popcorn online to a local address just to cover his tracks. "I'm exhausted, babe," he groaned, throwing himself onto the living room sofa. "That project is a nightmare. The client is a total pain." I walked out of the kitchen holding a glass of iced water. My face was a mask of neutrality. There was no warm, welcoming smile. "Drink this," I said shortly. David downed the water. "Thanks." "Oh, what's for dinner?" "I'm starving. I missed your cooking so much. Room service gets old fast." "Pot roast." "Your favorite," I replied. His eyes lit up. "Amazing. You really are the best wife." He reached out to grab my hand and kiss it, but I spun around, pretending to reach for a napkin. His hand hung awkwardly in the air. "I already ate." "You go ahead. I'm going to take a bath." "I've had a headache all day," I said without looking back, heading straight for the stairs. "You're not going to sit with me?" David asked, baffled. Usually, dinner was our sacred time to catch up. "Just a headache," I dismissed him, continuing up the steps. From the second floor, I could hear the clinking of his silverware. He ate ravenously. He suspected absolutely nothing. To him, his wife's coldness was just a mood swing. His overinflated ego made him blind. He felt untouchable, believing he had successfully conquered two women, one in the Hamptons for pleasure, and one at home to serve him. Back in the bedroom, I opened my laptop. An email notification popped up. My broker had found a potential buyer. A foreign diplomat looking for an immediate move, in ready UES townhouse. Willing to pay all. Cash in USD. Perfect. That night, when David slipped into bed, I pretended to be fast asleep, my back to him. He tried to spoon me, wrapping his arm around my waist. He had showered, but my nose could still pick up the faint, lingering ghost of pink fantasy embedded in his pores. I shifted my body away. "Babe," he whispered seductively. "Don't, David. I'm exhausted." I rejected him firmly. He huffed in annoyance and rolled over. Minutes later, his soft snoring filled the room. I opened my eyes in the darkness. "Sleep well, darling. Enjoy your sweet dreams tonight. Because you're about to wake up to a living nightmare." A week passed in a silent Cold War that David didn't even notice. I played the dutiful wife on the surface, ironing his shirts, making sure his coffee was hot, but my soul had already checked out. Our communication was reduced to yes, no, and okay. Today, I decided to pay a visit to David's office. Not to inspect, but to deliver a little surprise. I packed a Tupperware of homemade beef stew, something he had been craving lately. The perfect excuse to show up unannounced during his lunch hour. The corporate lobby greeted me with its freezing central air. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Mrs. Sterling." "Mr. Sterling is in his office. You can go right up." I nodded and stepped into the executive elevator. My heart beat faster, not out of nervousness to see my husband, but from the adrenaline of facing my enemy. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level. The hallway was empty. Most of the staff were out for lunch. I walked slowly, the thick carpet muffling the clicks of my Louboutins. The door to David's office was slightly ajar. Laughter spilled out into the hallway. A woman's giggles and a man's deep chuckle. I didn't barge in. I stood by the doorframe and peeked through the gap. There, in the massive leather CEO chair, David leaned back comfortably, and sitting right on his lap, straddling his thighs, was Cecilia. She was feeding him pieces of sliced fruit from a container. Her left arm was draped intimately around his neck. The top two buttons of her white blouse were undone, offering a generous view of her cleavage, a stark contrast to the innocent, timid girl she played in front of everyone else. "Ugh, you are so spoiled, boss. Making me feed you like this?" Cecilia cooed, her voice pitched artificially high to sound cute. "I'm tired from working so hard." "I need my daily vitamins from you," David flirted, biting a piece of cantaloupe right from her fingers, deliberately letting his lips graze her skin. My blood boiled, but I held it together. I took a deep breath, plastered a deadpan expression on my face, and pushed the heavy door wide open. "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it hit the room like a grenade. Cecilia jumped out of her skin. In her panic, or perhaps in a deliberate bid for drama, her elbow knocked over a steaming mug of black coffee sitting on the mahogany desk. "Ah!" Cecilia shrieked. The hot coffee spilled everywhere, mostly ruining the paperwork, but a small splash hit the sleeve of Cecilia's blouse. David bolted upright, nearly sending Cecilia tumbling to the floor if she hadn't grabbed the desk. His face went ghostly white, seeing me standing in the doorway, but his immediate, overwhelming panic was entirely focused on Cecilia. "Cece, are you okay?" David yelled frantically. He grabbed a handful of tissues and started dabbing at her arm like a madman. "Is it burning?" "Oh my God, your skin is turning red!" I just stood there holding the container of stew. The scene was absurd. My husband was more concerned about a coffee splash on his mistress's arm than the fact that his wife had just caught them basically having sex in his office. I stepped inside and slammed the Tupperware onto the glass coffee table with a loud thud. "Are we done with the theatrics?" I asked coldly. David whipped his head around, his eyes wild. Instead of looking guilty or begging for forgiveness, he looked at me with pure fury, as if my arrival was a fatal error that caused his precious princess to get hurt. "What is wrong with you?" David bellowed. He marched toward me and aggressively shoved my shoulder. Taken off guard, I stumbled backward, my heels caught in the carpet, and I fell hard onto my back. Pain shot up my spine, but the agony in my heart was far worse. "David!" I gasped, shocked by the physical violence. In 12 years together, he had never once laid a hand on me. "You did that on purpose to scare her!" David accused, pointing a trembling finger in my face. "Look at her! Her arm is blistered because you snuck up on us like a ghost. She's fragile, Catherine. She has sensitive skin. Not like you with your tough, weathered skin." My jaw dropped. Weathered skin. I, who spent a fortune maintaining my appearance for him. I, who had slaved away with him under the blistering sun on construction sites when we had nothing, was now called weathered just because I was more resilient than his pampered side piece. Behind David, Cecilia clutched her arm and let out pathetic little sobs. "Please, mister. Sterling, don't yell at her. It's my fault." Sob. "No, Cece. It's her fault." Barging in here with no manners, David snapped, looking at me with pure disgust. "Get up. Stop embarrassing yourself." I looked up at David from the floor. At that exact second, whatever microscopic shred of love I had left for him evaporated. All that remained was revulsion. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Slowly, I stood up. I smoothed out the wrinkles in my designer blazer. I brushed an imaginary speck of dust off my skirt. I kept my chin high and my posture perfect. I looked David dead in the eyes. It was a look that made him instinctively take a step back, because he saw something terrifyingly unfamiliar in my gaze, an absolute absence of fear. "Fine, David," I said, my voice eerily calm and steady. "Sorry for interrupting your busy workday. Please, carry on. Give the food to the security guards if you're too disgusted to eat food made by a weathered wife." I turned on my heel. "Catherine, where are you going?" David called out, his tone suddenly wavering. Maybe the reality of what he just did was finally sinking in. I didn't answer. I walked out the door and didn't look back. "Catherine!" I pulled the heavy office door shut behind me. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection. There were no tears. Instead, the corners of my mouth curled up into a faint, terrifying smile. "Thank you, David," I thought. That shove was the final stamp of approval I needed. I have zero hesitation about destroying you now. I pulled out my phone and texted Alex, the wealthy hedge fund manager and my oldest friend from college. He had carried a torch for me for years but had always respected my marriage. Last week, I had looped him in on my grand finale. To Alex, plan B is a go. Expedite the auction. Make sure the VIP invite lands on David's desk tomorrow morning. Alex's reply came through in seconds. Understood, my queen. Showtime. That evening, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was bathed in the dazzling light of crystal chandeliers. The vaulted ceilings reflected an opulence that was suffocating for those not born into it. But to me, tonight was the stage for the final act of a play I had meticulously directed. I stood in front of the vanity in the VIP powder room, checking my reflection. I wore a backless black velvet gown that hugged my curves perfectly, contrasting with my pale skin. My hair was swept into a modern chignon, with a few loose strands framing my face. My makeup was sharp, my lips painted a deep, bold burgundy. The submissive, dutiful wife waiting at home was gone. Tonight, I was Catherine, the executioner. The event was the annual High Society charity auction. As a long-standing patron, I had registered a very special item for the block. A large oil painting titled Shadow of a Lover. It wasn't just any painting. It was my own work from 10 years ago. It was a portrait of a young David, his face smudged with dirt and sweat, his eyes burning with iron determination to build a life for us. That painting was the ultimate symbol of my pure, unadulterated love for him. A symbol of the brutal years we survived together. David used to love that painting. He called it his lucky charm and swore he would never sell it, no matter the price. But tonight, I was auctioning it off. Because the man in that painting was dead, replaced by a monster obsessed with money and young flesh. I stepped out of the powder room, my stilettos clicking sharply against the marble floor. By the ballroom entrance, Alex was waiting. He looked devastatingly handsome in a classic black tuxedo and bow tie. "You look absolutely lethal, Kat," Alex murmured, offering me his arm. "Thank you, Alex." "Has our guest of honor arrived?" I asked, a wicked smile playing on my lips. Alex nodded, gesturing toward a round table near the stage. "Just got here." And he brought the circus with him. My eyes followed his gaze. There, sitting with his chest puffed out in arrogance, was my husband. And next to him, of course, was Cecilia. My blood hummed, not with pain, but with bitter amusement. Cecilia was wearing a cheap, glaringly bright red dress, covered in sequins that looked violently tacky under the elegant chandeliers. The neckline was too low, the slit too high. She looked like a Vegas showgirl who had wandered into the wrong party. She looked incredibly nervous, her eyes darting around wildly, clearly intimidated by the crushing aura of New York's old money. Meanwhile, David, thick-skinned as ever, was busy shaking hands with business tycoons, showing off Cecilia as if she were a shiny new trophy. "The VIP invite you sent worked like a charm," Alex whispered. "David would never turn down an invite that lists him as a top-tier benefactor." "His ego demands it," I replied. We walked to our table, directly across from David's. When David saw me, his eyes practically bugged out of his head. He almost dropped his champagne flute. He scanned me from head to toe, utterly bewildered that the breathtaking woman holding onto a billionaire's arm was the same wife he had shoved to the floor yesterday. Cecilia turned her head and I could see the raw, unfiltered jealousy on her face. She whispered something into David's ear, probably asking who the handsome man with me was. David's posture went rigid. His jaw clenched. He wanted to cause a scene, but he knew where he was. He couldn't throw a tantrum at the plaza. The event began. The auctioneer opened with boring pleasantries. Several luxury items were sold. A rare Hermes Birkin, a vintage Rolex, a private yacht trip to the Maldives. David tried to bid on a diamond necklace likely for Cecilia, but was quickly outbid by a senator's wife. And now, we come to the highlight of the evening. The auctioneer's voice boomed, silencing the room. A highly personal, deeply emotional piece of art. An original oil painting titled Shadow of a Lover, painted by Mrs. Catherine Sterling, wife of Mr. David Sterling, CEO of Sterling Development. A spotlight hit the stage. The velvet drape fell, revealing the massive portrait of young David staring bravely into the future. It was a masterpiece of emotion and intimacy. Every head in the room turned toward the stage, and then immediately pivoted to look at David at his VIP table. David's face flushed a deep, violent crimson. He never imagined I would put his sacred painting on the block. To him, This was the ultimate public humiliation. His wife was literally selling his face to the highest bidder, proving to the world that he was no longer worth keeping. Bidding for this incredible piece starts at $500,000, the auctioneer announced. Silence fell over the room. Then Alex casually raised his paddle. 1 million. His voice was clear and relaxed. Murmurs rippled through the elite crowd. A direct jump to 1 million. David glared at Alex with murderous intent. He recognized Alex as a massive hedge fund giant and my old friend. His fragile ego was instantly triggered. He could not, under any circumstances, allow another man, especially a man close to his wife, to literally own his face. David raised his paddle. 1.5 million. Beside him, Cecilia gasped. She grabbed his tuxedo sleeve. Babe, why is it so expensive? It's just an ugly painting. You could buy me a penthouse with that money, she hissed loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. David yanked his arm away roughly. Shut up! This is about pride. Alex smiled a wolfish smile and raised his paddle again. 2 million. 2.5, David shot back, his breathing growing heavy. 3 million, Alex countered effortlessly, as if he were ordering a martini. Cold sweat broke out on David's forehead. 3 million was a massive hit to his personal liquidity. His company's cash flow was already strained from stalled projects. But he couldn't back down now. The entire room was watching him. If he lost an auction for his own portrait, he would be the laughingstock of Wall Street by tomorrow morning. Babe, don't. That's company money. Cecilia panicked, her face pale at the thought of all that cash vanishing for an old canvas. 3.5 million, David yelled, his voice cracking slightly. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to stop this madness. But I simply sat there, elegantly taking a sip of my Dom Perignon, staring back at him with absolute zero emotion. I gave Alex a microscopic nod. 4.5 million, Alex stated flatly. The ballroom erupted in applause and gasps. It was an astronomical price for a local contemporary piece. David was shaking. $4.5 million was the entire net profit of his last high-rise project, but he saw the smirk of victory on Alex's face. He saw the glacial apathy in my eyes. He was cornered by his own hubris. With a trembling hand and shallow breath, David stood up. He thrust his paddle into the air. $5 million, he roared. Dead silence. No one breathed. The auctioneer looked at Alex. Do we have another bid? 5 million going once. Going twice. Alex slowly lowered his paddle and placed it on the table. He looked at David and began a slow, mocking clap. It was a universal gesture. Take it. You played yourself. Sold. To Mr. David Sterling for $5 million. The gavel slammed down. The sound of that wooden mallet hitting the block was the most beautiful symphony I had ever heard. The room exploded in a standing ovation. David collapsed back into his chair, looking as if his soul had been sucked out of his body. He won, but he looked like a man walking to the gallows. Cecilia sat beside him with her arms crossed, scowling in a furious pout because her multi-million-dollar shopping spree had just vanished into thin air. What David didn't know was that, as the sole owner and donor of the piece, the $5 million minus the charity's cut and taxes would be deposited directly into my private account. I stood up and walked over to David's table with Alex. David looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Are you happy now? He hissed. You did this just to humiliate me. I offered him a saccharine, fake smile. Humiliate you? David, I just elevated your status. Look at everyone clapping. You love your wife so much you just spent $5 million to buy back our memories. It's terribly romantic. The money, David choked out, the realization dawning on him. The money goes to you, doesn't it? Of course it does. Consider it my severance package, or the return on the investment I made in you 10 years ago. With compounded interest, I whispered right next to his ear. What are you talking about? David asked, genuine confusion mingling with terror. Enjoy the painting, David. It's the only piece of me you'll ever own again, I said, turning my back on him. Come on, Alex. Our business here is done. I walked out of that ballroom feeling lighter than air. Behind me, David remained frozen, surrounded by wealthy elites congratulating him. entirely unaware that he had just personally financed his wife's escape. Tonight, I didn't just sell a painting. I sold my past. And David bought it at a premium price. JFK Airport at 11 p.m. was wonderfully quiet. I sat in the first-class Emirates lounge, staring at the boarding pass in my hand. Destination: Berlin. One way. My luggage was already checked. I only carried a designer tote holding my passport, my wallet, and a brand new iPhone with a German SIM card. My old phone, the one holding my American number, and every toxic memory of David was powered off and buried at the bottom of my bag. My bank had confirmed the wire transfer an hour ago. The auction funds had safely landed in my offshore account, joining the millions from the secret sale of the townhouse and our liquidated portfolios. I was incredibly rich, completely free, and entirely alone. It was terrifying, yet utterly intoxicating. As I sipped the last of my orange juice on American soil, the real drama was just beginning back in the Upper East Side. I could picture the scene perfectly. David driving home from the hotel, his mind a chaotic mess. In the back of the SUV lay the $5 million painting wrapped in protective cloth, a monument to his own stupidity. In the passenger seat, Cecilia would not shut up. "Are you crazy, David? $5 million for a stupid picture? We could have bought a boutique in Soho for me. You are so selfish just because it's your own face." Cecilia would whine, pouting, expecting to be coddled. "Shut up, Cece. My head is splitting," David would yell. He'd be panicking, trying to figure out how to cover his company's payroll on Monday, now that his personal accounts were bled dry for a painting. He probably thought he could just come home, sweet-talk me, and get me to transfer the money back since I managed our finances. How pathetic, David. Their car would pull up to our gorgeous Upper East Side townhouse. David would press the garage remote. Nothing. The heavy iron gates wouldn't budge. "Broken again?" he'd mutter, slamming the button repeatedly. Frustrated, he'd get out and walk to the security booth. Empty. Gary, our loyal security guard, had been given a very generous severance package by me 2 days ago and was already in Florida. "Where the hell is everyone?" David would curse. He'd grab his physical keys and try the side gate. The key wouldn't turn. The locks had been changed. Cecilia would step out into the cold night. "Babe, why can't we go inside? I'm freezing, and I need to pee." David would ignore her, hopping the fence like a trespasser, snagging his expensive suit in the process. He'd run to the mahogany front door and press his thumb to the smart lock. Beep! Access denied. Damn it! He'd kick the door and punch in our anniversary code. Beep! Access denied. His fingerprints and codes were wiped. The house was now a fortress, actively rejecting its former king. Finally, out of desperation, he'd smash a side window with a heavy terracotta planter. The security alarms would blare, waking up the elite neighborhood. He wouldn't care. He'd unlock the door from the inside and pull a terrified Cecilia in. But as they stepped into the foyer, they would freeze. The silence inside wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, dead. The motion sensor lights would flick on, revealing the truth. Empty. The custom Italian leather sofas gone. The 8.5-inch OLED TV gone. The Persian rugs, the crystal vases, the antique tables, all gone. The house was gutted down to the studs. Only the cold marble floors and the faded squares on the walls where art used to hang remained. Their breathing would echo in the massive, vacant space. "David, were we robbed?" Cecilia would ask, trembling, clutching his arm. David wouldn't answer. He'd sprint up the grand staircase to the master suite. "Catherine! Cat!" He'd throw open the bedroom doors. Empty. The massive king-sized bed was gone. The custom walk-in closet was stripped bare. David's designer suits and shoes were piled haphazardly into cheap cardboard moving boxes on the floor. My side of the closet didn't have a single thread left. In the dead center of the massive, empty room sat a single, cheap metal folding chair. On that chair rested a manila envelope and a platinum diamond ring. My wedding band. David's legs would give out. He'd fall to his knees on the hardwood floor. His shaking hands would tear open the envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, already signed and notarized by me, alongside the transfer of deed documents. "This property has been sold. The new owners take possession on Monday. Remove your boxes by tomorrow, or they will be thrown in the dumpster." There was no emotional goodbye letter. No long-winded curses. Just cold, hard legal facts. Catherine. David would groan, the sound echoing miserably in the empty house. No. No, you couldn't have. He would rip his phone out of his pocket, his shaking fingers mashing the speed dial for my number. And from across the world, sitting in my plush airline seat, I watched my screen light up. David calling. I ignored it. He called again, and again, and again. I pictured him sitting in the dust of his own making, surrounded by the void he had created, mashing the call button like a madman. He called while Cecilia whined about where they were going to sleep. He called as he realized his credit cards were going to bounce because I froze the accounts. He called as the reality set in that without me, he didn't know the passwords, the insurance policies, or how to function as an adult. 10th call. 50th call. 100th call. I was already on the plane. A smiling flight attendant offered me a warm towel. My phone buzzed relentlessly. The notifications piled up. 220 missed calls. 221 missed calls. 222 missed calls. A beautiful number. A symbol of his frantic, too little too late insanity. He was likely screaming at the walls, throwing the wedding ring across the room. He finally realized that a house is just bricks and mortar without me in it. He finally realized I was the foundation holding up his perfect little life. And now, that foundation was cruising at 3,000 feet. I held down the power button. The screen went black. "Goodbye, New York," I whispered. The jet engines roared, pushing me back into my seat as the plane lifted off the runway. A profound wave of relief washed over me. No more heartbreak. No more betrayal. Just the vast night sky and a blank canvas of a future waiting for me. The old Catherine was left behind in an empty shell of a house. The new Catherine was heading to Europe to claim her happiness. As for David, he got exactly what he wanted. The front seat reserved permanently for his assistant. I hoped they enjoyed sleeping in the car that night, because the house was no longer his. News of someone's ultimate downfall rarely. 3 days after I landed in Europe, escaping the ashes of the marriage I had burned to the ground, the news reached me. Not through a nightmare, but through an international call from Alex. His voice was heavy, yet laced with a grim sense of justice. "It's over for them, Kat," Alex said bluntly. "Interstate 495. Karma works faster than Amazon Prime." I listened to his report while staring at the gray Berlin sky from the window of my temporary luxury flat. Between the police reports, the dashcam footage Alex's private investigator had acquired, and the paramedics' statements, I could perfectly reconstruct the horrific event in my mind. I could see it so vividly, as if my spirit was sitting in the back seat of that SUV, watching God collect their debts in full. That afternoon, the sky over the Long Island Expressway hung low and black, pregnant with a violent storm. It perfectly matched the suffocating, toxic atmosphere inside the cabin of David's Mercedes SUV. The car was tearing down the highway, but the air inside was thick with tension. David was driving at the absolute limit of his sanity. His face, usually so perfectly groomed and arrogant, was haggard. Deep purple bags under his eyes proved he hadn't slept a wink since the auction. His liquid assets were gone, locked inside a canvas painting. His primary credit cards were maxed out or frozen by me. His corporate accounts were temporarily locked pending an emergency audit triggered by an anonymous tip I had left before boarding my flight. Next to him sat Cecilia, his mistress, his soulmate, the girl he claimed was so incredibly fragile. But that afternoon, Cecilia's fragility was nowhere to be found. She sat with her dirty sneakers propped up on the pristine dashboard of the luxury car. Her face was locked in a furious scowl, and her mouth fired off insults sharper than a scalpel. "Are you serious right now, David? We're eating stale gas station sandwiches for lunch?" Cecilia's shrill voice pierced the silence, dripping with entitlement. "I'm starving. I wanted a steakhouse in Manhattan, not this dry garbage." David gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Give it a rest, Cece. Can't you see I'm stressed?" My debit card was swallowed by the ATM at the rest stop. "The banking app is locked out. We have to preserve whatever cash I have in my wallet until I can get to the bank on Monday." "Oh, whatever." "Excuses," Cecilia scoffed venomously, shooting him a look of pure disgust. Mr. Bigshot CEO. The old money millionaire. "We're living out of a car like homeless people. If I knew you were this broke, I would have gone to Miami with the VP of marketing. Instead, I'm stuck on a highway with a bankrupt old man. The words struck David's ego like a sledgehammer. The man who fancied himself a king, a savior rescuing a sweet, innocent girl from the cruel city, was brutally slapped awake by reality. "What did you just call me?" David's voice shook with rage. He turned his head away from the road, glaring at her with bloodshot eyes. "So this whole time you were just using me? Where's the Cecilia who said she loved me? The one who didn't care about money?" Cecilia threw her head back and laughed a dry, wicked, grating sound. "David, please. Are you living in a fairy tale? Look at yourself. You're getting old. Your hairline is receding. If it wasn't for your black card, why the hell would I look twice at you? I need a sponsor for my lifestyle, not teenage romance." "You gold-digging whore!" David exploded. The veins in his neck bulged as he lost all control of his temper. "You're the idiot who threw away a diamond wife to pick up trash like me," Cecilia screamed back. The screaming match completely shattered David's focus. He broke the golden rule of the highway. He took his eyes off the road. He was fixated on Cecilia's mocking face, completely unaware that his right foot was pressing heavier onto the gas pedal. The heavy SUV was hurtling down a slick, downhill curve at nearly 90 miles per hour. "Watch out!" Cecilia shrieked hysterically. David snapped his head forward, and his heart stopped. Less than 60 feet in front of them, a massive 1.8 wheeler carrying steel beams was crawling in the left lane, struggling to pass another vehicle. The truck's red taillights flared blindingly bright. They were way too close. Hitting the brakes wouldn't be enough. In that crucial split-second window between life and death, the human brain works in mysterious ways. Pure survival instinct dictates that a driver will usually swerve to protect themselves, exposing the passenger side to the impact. But the ultimate irony of David's life occurred in that exact millisecond. His habits over the past few months, the habit of coddling Cecilia, protecting her from the rain, buckling her seatbelt, making sure she was comfortable and safe in the front seat, had created a fatal muscle memory. David's reflexes betrayed his own survival instincts. Instead of jerking the wheel to the right to save himself, David violently yanked the steering wheel to the left. He threw the body of the car sideways, ensuring the passenger side where Cecilia sat was completely clear of the truck's massive steel bumper. He protected the woman who had just called him a bankrupt old man. Crash. The sound of the impact was deafening, like a bomb detonating on the asphalt. The driver's side of the Mercedes slammed directly into the solid steel corner of the 1.8 wheeler at 90 miles per hour. Metal crumpled, glass shattered, and concrete groaned. The SUV was launched into the air, spinning violently before slamming down into the concrete median barrier. It rolled 3 times before coming to a stop upside down on the shoulder. Thick white smoke billowed from the crushed engine block. Shards of safety glass glittered on the wet asphalt like diamonds of death. The car's horn blared in one continuous, agonizing note, the sound of a heavy, unconscious body slumped over the steering wheel. David's world went entirely black. A few hours later, the scene shifted to the emergency ward of an upstate New York trauma center. The sharp smell of bleach and the squeak of stretcher wheels echoed down the hallway. In a curtained cubicle, Cecilia sat on the edge of a hospital bed. She looked disheveled, her hair was a mess, and she sported a small bandage on her forehead and some minor scrapes on her arms. But miraculously, she was alive and largely unharmed. The luxury SUV's advanced airbag system, combined with David's sacrificial swerve, had protected her perfectly. But there wasn't a single tear on her face. No trauma of almost losing the man she supposedly loved. The only anxiety on her face was financial. An older trauma nurse approached Cecilia, carrying a sealed plastic evidence bag. She looked sympathetic. "Miss, these are Mr. Sterling's personal belongings recovered by the Highway Patrol. Since you're the only contact here and stated you are his fiancé, I need you to hold on to these." Cecilia snatched the bag with trembling hands, not from sorrow, but from greed. "Thank you. How is he doing?" she asked, putting on a practiced, pitiful voice. The nurse sighed heavily. "It's grim, sweetheart. He suffered catastrophic spinal cord trauma from the direct impact. His lungs were punctured by his ribs. The surgeon says if he wakes up, he will likely be paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. He's in the ICU now. Paralyzed." Cecilia blinked. Inside her calculating brain, the math was already done. Paralyzed, bankrupt, divorced, useless. As soon as the nurse walked away, Cecilia ripped open the plastic bag. She dug out David's blood-stained alligator leather wallet. She opened it greedily. Inside was about $2,000 in cash, the very last of the emergency funds David had taken from his home safe. She stuffed the cash into her pockets. She took his debit cards, knowing the PIN numbers from watching him buy her designer bags. Then, her eyes fell on the Patek Philippe watch. The sapphire glass was shattered, but the intricate mechanical heart was still ticking. Without a shred of hesitation or guilt, Cecilia slipped the $1,000,000 watch into her jacket pocket. "Not bad," she muttered under her breath. "Even smashed. A pawn shop in the Diamond District will give me 50 grand for the parts. Enough for a nose job and a ticket to LA. Cecilia slipped off the hospital bed. She didn't walk to the ICU to hold David's hand. She crept down the hallway, stopping only to peer through the thick glass window of his room. Inside, David lay trapped in a prison of tubes, wires, and bandages. The rhythmic beep of the life support machine was the only sign he was alive. The powerful, arrogant man who had screamed at his loyal wife to defend his manipulative intern was now reduced to a broken shell of flesh and bone. Cecilia pressed her hand against the glass, a cruel smirk curling her lips. "Sorry, boss," she whispered into the empty corridor. "I'm not a nurse, and I'm definitely not your stupid wife. I don't do broke guys in wheelchairs. Consider this my overtime pay." She turned around and walked briskly out of the hospital doors, ordered an Uber, and vanished into the upstate night. She left him fighting for his life entirely alone. No wife, no mistress, no money, and now, no legs. Back in Berlin, I set my coffee cup down on the table. Alex looked at me, searching my eyes. "Are you going to fly back?" "To see him?" Alex asked gently. I looked at my reflection in the cafe window. My face was serene. No vengeance, but no pity either. "No," I answered firmly. He chose his path. He chose who he wanted, sitting in the front seat. Let her take care of him. "But she ran away, Kat." "He has nobody," Alex reminded me. I smiled a very small, cold smile. "Then let him experience the absolute freezing reality of loneliness. Let him sit in the silence. The universe is giving him a private lesson, Alex." Who am I to interrupt it? I slept better that night than I had in years. Poetic justice had been served on a silver platter. 1 year later, winter in Berlin was brutally beautiful. The snow had been falling heavily for 3 days, blanketing the historic city in thick, freezing white powder. The biting wind forced people to bury their faces in thick wool scarves, but the freezing temperatures outside couldn't touch the warmth that now radiated through my life. This past year was a total metamorphosis. The fragile Catherine, who lived in the shadow of her husband, was dead. I was Catherine the curator, owner of a chic, highly sought-after contemporary art gallery in the Mitte district. I had made a name for myself in the European art scene, standing on my own 2 feet, built by my own sweat and tears. That evening, just weeks before Christmas, I was walking down the cobblestone streets near the Gendarmenmarkt. Twinkling fairy lights hung above, and the rich scent of glühwein, hot-spiced wine, and roasting bratwurst filled the crisp air, creating a magical atmosphere. Beside me walked Alex, holding a large umbrella to shield us from the falling snow. Alex, a man who had proven that patience is the purest form of love. He never pushed me, never demanded a label. He was just there, a shoulder to cry on in the early days, a brilliant sounding board for my gallery, and a protector who asked for nothing in return. "Let's grab hot chocolate from that spot on the corner," Alex smiled, his breath pluming in the freezing air. "Yes, please. I need sugar after curating abstract paintings all day." "My brain is fried," I laughed. We shared a warm, easy laugh. But that laughter slowly died in my throat as our steps halted near the entrance of the U-Bahn station. There, tucked into a corner, slightly shielded from the wind but still exposed to the freezing temperatures, was a figure huddled on a piece of flattened cardboard. Seeing homeless beggars in major European cities isn't uncommon, but something about this specific figure made my boots freeze to the pavement. Every instinct in my body screamed, sending a wave of both alarm and sickening recognition. The man was wearing a filthy, tattered winter coat, far too thin for the 20-degree weather. A cheap beanie was pulled low over his face. Laying next to him on the snow was a pair of cheap, rusted aluminum crutches. In front of him sat a dirty coffee cup containing a few pathetic euro coins. The man looked up as my expensive leather boots stopped right in front of his cardboard mat. His eyes met mine, and the world ground to an absolute halt. Good God, the face that was once perfectly groomed, the face that Wall Street magazines had called handsome, was destroyed. A jagged, ugly scar ran down his left cheek, a permanent souvenir from the shattered glass of his Mercedes. His eyes were deeply sunken, hollow, and cloudy, surrounded by dark circles of chronic pain and starvation. His lips were cracked and blue. He was emaciated, as if the guilt had eaten the meat right off his bones. It was David, my ex-husband. The arrogant CEO who dropped $5 million out of pure spite was now begging for pennies on the freezing streets of Berlin. David's eyes widened. His pupils dilated in sheer shock. There was disbelief, then intense shame, but a second later, it morphed into a desperate, blazing fire of hope. "Kay, Catherine?" His voice was a broken, raspy croak, like sandpaper scraping against stone. He coughed violently, his thin frame shaking. He tried to stand up. His filthy, trembling hands reached for his crutches. It was an agonizing movement. He dragged one leg that was stiff and twisted, while the other looked completely atrophied. He nearly slipped on the ice, but Alex, driven by a darkly ironic sense of human decency, reached out and grabbed his shoulder to stop him from falling. The billionaire whom David had mocked and tried to financially destroy was now the only thing keeping him upright in the gutter. "David," I said. My voice was utterly flat. No tremor of emotion. No explosive rage. No weeping nostalgia. My heart was as calm and frozen as a winter lake. "Catherine? Oh my God, I finally found you." David began to openly sob. Dirty tears carved tracks down his grime-covered cheeks. "I looked everywhere for you, Cat. I spent the Lizenenable insurance payout just to get a one-way ticket here to find you. I found out you were in Berlin from an old art magazine I dug out of a trash can in New York." He tried to hobble closer. The stench of unwashed clothes and cheap alcohol hit my nose. Alex immediately stepped between us, shielding me with polite but absolute authority. David stopped. He looked at Alex with pathetic, desperate envy, then turned his pleading eyes back to me. "Catherine, please help me. Look at me, babe," he whimpered. It was the same manipulative tone he used to use, but now it just sounded pathetic. "I'm destroyed. That devil Cecilia took everything. My wallet, my watch, my cash. She left me like garbage in that hospital. My parents were too embarrassed by the scandal. They cut me off. All my Wall Street buddies pretend they don't know me." David dropped his crutches and let himself fall onto his knees in the slushy snow. He clasped his dirty hands together in prayer. "It's only you, Kat. Only you. You're the only good thing I ever had. Please forgive me. I lost my mind. I've changed, I swear it. I see it all clearly now. You were the only one who loved me for me, not my money. We had 10 beautiful years, right? Does that mean nothing to you? Take me home, Kat. I'll be your servant. Just please, don't let me freeze to death out here." I looked down at him. Listening to his monologue, I felt like I was watching a badly written soap opera. He hadn't changed. He didn't seek me out because he loved me. He sought me out because he was a parasite that had lost its host, desperately trying to reattach itself to the one person who had survived him. He dared to mention our 10 years together, the same 10 years he threw away for the girl he put in the front seat. "You're not my husband anymore, David." I cut through his rambling, my tone icy. "We were legally divorced over a year ago. The papers were mailed to your parents' estate. That's just paper. In the eyes of God, we're still married," David cried hysterically, reaching out to grab the hem of my wool coat. I stepped back. Passers-by were starting to stare. A crippled, homeless man weeping at the feet of an elegant woman in a tailored coat drew attention. But I didn't care. My capacity for embarrassment died the day he told me to sit in the back of my own car. "Where is your heart, Catherine?" "I'm disabled! I'm sick!" he screamed, making a final pathetic bid for my empathy. I looked at Alex, then back down at the man groveling in the snow. A year ago, I might have cracked. I might have cried with him, picked him up, paid for his rehab, and nursed him back to health. That was the old Catherine. But standing here now, I realized something strange. I didn't even hate him. Hate requires energy. Hate implies you still care about what they did to you. Hate is just the flip side of love. What I felt now was absolute, terrifying indifference. He was no different to me than a stranger passing by on the street. No bond, no feelings, no shared history. He was just a closed chapter of my past. a bill I had paid in full. I sold his portrait, I sold the house, and my love for him was dead and buried. I leaned forward slightly, looking directly into his red weeping eyes. My gaze pierced straight through his hollow soul. "Get up, David. Don't embarrass yourself any further," I said quietly. David's face lit up for a fraction of a second, thinking my calm tone meant I was giving him a second chance. "You forgive me? We can start over? I promise." I shook my head slowly, offering him a tiny, final smile. The smile of an eternal goodbye. I delivered the single sentence I had carried in my heart for a year. "I'm sorry, David. I don't hate you. Because hating you would mean I still care. Right now, you are nothing more to me than a stranger whose name I happen to know." The words slid out smoothly sharp, flawless, and utterly final. Like a judge's gavel striking the block, sentencing him to a living purgatory. David's face shattered. The last spark of hope in his eyes was violently extinguished, replaced by a bottomless, horrifying void. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. In that moment, he finally understood. His ultimate punishment wasn't the bankruptcy. It wasn't losing his legs. It wasn't even Cecilia's betrayal. The ultimate punishment was being completely erased from the heart of the woman who used to make him the center of her universe. I straightened my posture, took a deep breath, and let the crisp, winter air fill my lungs. The last invisible weight on my shoulders vanished into the wind. "Come on, Alex. The hot chocolate place is going to close," I said, linking my arm tightly through his. "Let's go," Alex replied softly, never looking back. We turned and walked away into the heavy snowfall. Our boots clicked rhythmically against the pavement, fading into the ambient noise of the city. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. To me, the figure left behind was just part of the cold city landscape, no more important than a street lamp or a frozen park bench. Behind us, in the unforgiving winter of Berlin, David was left entirely alone, kneeling in the slush, weeping silently as the indifferent crowd walked past him. He was accompanied only by the ghosts of his own regrets, freezing his heart much faster than the snow burying his paralyzed legs. He finally received exactly what he had given me all those months ago: total and complete abandonment. And I just kept walking forward, toward the warm golden lights glowing in the distance.